Welcome to 1407 Gray Mountain Lane. This is the living memory of the X-Men. Today, I am joined by this night.
Can we edit that out?
Yeah.
Just kidding.
X-Men head writer of the quintessential X-Men head writer in the 90s, like the one that I got into. Scott, like he's creator of Generation X. He wrote for Uncanny X-Men, wrote for X-Men. He wrote a few issues for Excalibur. Like, he's done a lot.
X Factor, I did some. Yeah, I pretty much did everything at the time.
Right.
Age of Apocalypse.
Right.
You know?
Oh, we're gonna get to that.
Classic.
Let's get Scott Lobdell,
Classic.
everybody. Okay.
Look, even my dog is happy to see me.
Right.
Hey. Did you eat well? You did. You had food. Okay, good.
Licking their chops.
Now she's
That was a
happy.
good meal. First of all, thank you for coming. Thank you for doing this on like New Year's Eve. This is amazing for me.
Is it New Year's Eve? Holy shit! I gotta go. I didn't realize it was New Year's Eve.
Right.
I have like 5 parties to go to.
Hey, you're in demand. That's good. That's cool.
No, I have no one. I have nothing.
You got that.
We
Scarlet
can talk
Witch.
right up until midnight.
You got that Scarlet Witch.
We could talk right up until midnight and do the countdown together.
Okay.
Would that be your longest interview?
It would
9
be my
hours?
longest. It would be my longest first interview. So every other interview afterwards would have to get past through that. Like you're not as long as Lobdell was. Lobdell, we talked about everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you tell people you're gonna do an interview, you say, I just gotta block you out from like 3 to 12. Is that okay? And you're like, but how many people have had as long of a career though? Say, let's be honest.
Only a handful of people. All right. So you started the X-Men like right after Claremont left, right?
Very shortly after.
Yeah, very shortly after. So, like,
yeah, what happened was John had taken over, and the books were being done like 2 weeks apart.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Wills and Jim were turning in a book. You had two. It was like 2 weeks of. I'll just tell you, they were plotting the book, so they were sending faxes over, like the thermal faxes that were like curl up on you, and you had to
like a parchment,
you know, and was that
like a parchment?
those, yeah, you had to actually cut them, and so they were sending them, and they had like a picture of they had a square with an X and a 0 in it, and underneath it said Gambit talks to Rogue, and then the next panel was you see like 3 lines, and it's like Wolverine breaks in and says stop it, you know, or whatever, and it's like that's what we had to work with. And while they had turned that in, they were doing the pencils. So a lot of times I didn't even see the pencils until the comic book was printed. It was that crazy. And John was like, you know, I'm not going to work that way, and I demand 2 weeks with every issue of 2 weeks of scripting. And they were like, we don't have 2 weeks of scripting. Like these books, you know, we're selling 1 million issues. They're going out the door. We can't miss an issue because it'll like knock over the quarterly projections into the net. It was like such a nightmare. And so Bob Harris had gone to pretty much everybody there was in the industry to go to who you could reach by phone.
Right.
And they were all like, they're like, hey, I'm not going to go up against John, and I'm not going to be the guy that ruined the X-Men. You know, like I'm not going to follow up Chris and be the guy that ruined the X-Men. So that left only one person crazy enough to be like, sure, okay, I'll do it. And so that's what happened. But
that is amazing.
And you know what's funny is, I don't know if you read all these things online, but I always read about how, Bob Harris and I went to high school and we were best friends, and that's how I got the job and blah, blah, blah. And the truth is that I had only had one conversation with Bob before this. And I was doing a Beast story for Marvel Comics Presents. Mm-hmm. And halfway through, he decided, well, I don't want this to happen. And so I was in the bathroom at Marvel, and I'd come out and he had walked in, and I said, I go, I don't think that was really fair what you did to, you're like blowing up the story in the middle of the thing. Well, that's just the way it is. So I go, well, I think you're being very unfair. And we got in this like little argument in the men's room, and I walked off, and somebody was like, oh man, I can't believe it. You shouldn't piss Bob off. He's the X-Men editor. I'm like, what does that have to do with me? I said, I'm never going to write the X-Men as long as I live. Like, what? I don't care if I get in a fight with Bob Harris. And then that day when I got the gig, I was in Terry Kavanaugh's office, working late, and he comes in, he's like, Scott, walk with me. I'm like, okay, all right.
Talk like that?
And so I walked to his office. Oh yeah, he was but I love the guy. But at the time I didn't know him at all. And so he brings me into his office, and he puts these thermal they're all like, it's like a bundle, instead of what we see now, like pages. Mm-hmm. And he goes, 22 pages in 24 hours. Can you do it? And I was like, yeah. And in my head, I'm thinking, well, if I screw it up, people will go, he did it in 24 hours. At least he got the book out.
Yeah.
And if it was good, people would go, oh my God, look what he did in 24 hours. And so as it was, he loved it. And then I wound up doing that for 6 issues of Uncanny, mm-hmm. and 6 issues of X-Men. And at the time, it was only going to be those 6 issues. And then Fabian was going to take over both titles.
Right.
And then it turned out that one day, like I never got the X-Men. I never got it. I just started writing it. Right. And then before you know it, 7 years had passed.
That's crazy. That's insane.
Yeah.
So what are your favorite X moments? Like, you were the X writer for Executioner Song, Fatal Attractions. Legion Quest is super underrated to me. We wouldn't have Age of Apocalypse.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Quest.
Thank you. And it's funny because if you look close, you'll see that like Fabian did the breakdowns for what do you call it, for the ones you mentioned, Executioner Song and what's the other one you mentioned? Fatal Attractions. Yeah, that was him. And it really wasn't until Age of Apocalypse that I was finally like, okay, because Fabian would love these crossover events. Mm-hmm. And, I came to like them, but I came to like them for a very specific reason. And that was because it felt like, like we were doing hour-long TV episodes, and suddenly we get a feature film every 6 months, and it'd be like anything can happen, That was fun.
I'm glad you said that, because after Age of Apocalypse, every book seemed like it was a TV show, and everything was leading up to the season finale with Onslaught. Uh-huh. And I thought maybe I was watching way too much TV and I was seeing the patterns, but now that you said it, I'm like, okay, it was intentional.
Yeah, no, it was really fun. And then also like even if I think this could be incorrect because it's been years now, but I think I was doing Operation Zero Tolerance the same time I was doing X-Men in Space, Ooh. And it was like, my goal was to do a 6-issue arc in X-Men and a 6-issue arc in Uncanny. And then when they came together after those 6 months, it would feel like, that they were both, the X-Men would come from space and everything would be screwed up because it'd be in the wake of Zero Tolerance. And the Zero Tolerance people would be like, suddenly the X-Men land, and they were all going to be not different, but, they'd been to war, and, no one on Earth could, understand it. So suddenly they come back and they're more hardened, and the other X-Men are like, you know, and the X-Men come back and Bobby's in charge, and it's just, so, but it's funny because I don't know, like there's a thing Jim Shooter used to talk about it, I guess, but it was like the illusion of change. And I always thought that, like rather than do the illusion of change, it would be cool to actually do change in the book. Because when Chris was at his height, you never knew what was happening. Like they went to, they're in the circus one day,
Yes.
And you're like, what? And then suddenly Magneto takes them into space, and then they, crash in the Savage Land, and then they're in Japan with, of all people, the Alpha Flight, and you're like, what? It was like, you just didn't know what was happening, and it was so exciting. And since then, we've gotten into this, like, here's an arc, and nothing's going to happen for the first 3 issues because we're breaking it down, and it's very exciting. Everything's decompressed, and whereas it should be like, I was like all for change. I kept wanting to,
Right.
So.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought up the Space X-Men, because that's one of my personal favorite arcs. And you did it classic X-Men too. After a really big battle, and then like the Gladiator just kidnaps them. He really just I love it. You're like, and they're just like, so you're not going to tell us what's going on? No, we're not going to tell you. You're just going to send you out there. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and I love that Trish was with them.
Yeah,
that was fun.
Oh man,
and Rogue's costume, we used to call it the Eggplant Costume because it was that purple.
Purple. That was cool though. That was really cool. And the way you redesigned Bishop.
Yeah, but one time about six years ago, I walked into a convention, and standing in front of me was Rogue in the Eggplant costume. I'm like, oh my God, I got to get your picture. This is awesome. I've never seen anybody cosplay in the Eggplant costume. That was so much fun.
That was a fun era. So how did you come up with your idea, like with the after coming off of Operation Zero Tolerance, Age of Apocalypse, you're coming into Onslaught. What was your idea? Like, who came up with the idea, like, let's just have Xavier just lose his mind?
Well, it's funny. It's kind of a long story, but it's a very funny story in that when I was after the Age of Apocalypse, they had a conference with all the ex-writers, and we went around the room and they said, okay, if you do one thing, what do you want to do? If you just do whatever the one thing. And, Warren Ellis was like, I like them all to get drunk in a bar. And, he said, but I know you won't let me do it. And it's like, no, go do that. If you want them to get drunk in the bar, then sure. Right? So he did his drunk in the bar issue, which was excellent.
Yeah, it was.
And when they got to me, they said, what do you want to do? I go, I want to do an issue where the X-Men are sitting at home, and all of a sudden you hear, and boom, and they run out, and Juggernaut had like slammed into the ground and skid a mile away, and he's like slammed into a tree, and they all go running up to him, and they go, oh my God, Juggernaut, are you okay? And he just says, Onslaught, and passes out.
I remember that.
And everybody's like, wow, that's really cool. Like, who's Onslaught? Like, I have no idea. I just think somebody that's what I want to do. And they're like, okay, well, you do that. So I did that. And then about maybe 3 months later, Bob says, listen, because 3 months later, the issue would come out because we're back on track. And Bob comes and he goes, listen, you got to explain who Onslaught is, because the editors are all saying, like, nobody could beat up Juggernaut. You have to say who Onslaught is. And I said, no, I'd rather not. I don't really have any interest in knowing who Onslaught is. So, so a few months later, when it was decided that the Image guys were going to come in and take over those books, again, huge fan of change. I'm like, hey, you know what? Let's do it. And I said, let me do Iron Man. They're like, okay, you're gonna make people angry. And I said, that's all right. I'm into making people angry. That's fine. Like, we can do that. And so So we were trying to figure out how, like, what villain we could use that could launch this whole new universe. And we were trying to figure out, well, it's not Kingpin. He doesn't have that power. Red Skull. We just used Apocalypse. Magneto doesn't have it. And all of a sudden, one day, I'm like, oh my God, I went into the office. I go, there's only one person that can do this. It's Onslaught. And it's like, that's great. We don't know anything about him. He can separate the universe. And so then we got working on how. And I forget. I remember like a few months before that, Magneto had shut off Xavier shut off Magneto's mind.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, what if he didn't shut it off? What if he took it inside of him? And, Magneto's been in this prison inside of Xavier's mind. And as this is going on, the two of them are like making each other crazy, and you don't even realize it's happening. And so I believe it was, I remember Mark Waid, can't remember what it was, but he brought something into it. I forget, but he, so we were, so it was decided, okay, so that's who Onslaught is. Onslaught is the completely corrupted by Magneto, his friend, his closest friend, that this is who Onslaught became. And so then this is like, okay, 6 months later, 7 months later. So then what makes it really fun is if Onslaught is the anger and rage inside of Xavier, who is the first person that Xavier would lash out at if he suddenly was lashing out at people? His stepbrother Juggernaut.
Yeah, right. That it makes sense. It totally makes sense.
Yeah, but what made it so much fun is that like it didn't start out that way. It just started because I wanted to do a scene with Juggernaut, and I thought Onslaught is such a great name. And then that became, so it was just pretty funny. It was like,
that is cool.
The fact that you could reverse engineer it, and then it makes perfect sense. So, but that happened a bunch of times. I was always, laying down breadcrumbs and going back and picking them up later. So.
Oh yeah. I've seen a lot of them. I mean, like, going back to like after Age of Apocalypse, when you took over X-Men, you had this one. You destroyed Avalon. You had when we had Holocaust from the Age of Apocalypse come in, and the Acolytes found him, and then he just woke up and just destroyed everything. I thought like, wow, all this is happening.
And then Colossus with the loss of his sister. That was so sad. You made Xavier a human being, whereas not writers nowadays, they always portray him as really shady. Like you can't really trust him. I'm like, he's a telepath. Yeah, I think that's really, I mean, I can't speak to it, so I don't want people to watch this and be like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. But I don't read it, but from what I see, it's like they just, like, I don't know. I don't think they have any idea what to do with Xavier or the Beast. I mean, poor Hank. They turn Hank into nobles, for God's sake.
Beast. Oh, okay. And the fact is, people don't like the fact that he's being arrogant. And they said like they want him to be the bouncing happy Beast. And I look back at those books and like he seemed like he was depressed. He has the tears of a clown. Like everybody liked, because when he got switched out with the Dark Beast and no one noticed that, like I can think that could really put you in a
that would depress anyone.
Yeah, right. Exactly. All right.
I see I have 20% left on my computer, so I have to change.
Oh yeah.
I have to put the plug in.
Oh yeah, no problem. Also, like I just really like that Trish Tilby thing. Like looking back on everything, she was an opportunist.
I'm sorry, who was an opportunist?
Trish Tilby, the reporter. Because like the way I look at her is like she got with him when he was with X Factor and knowing who he was, and then she broke the Legacy virus story. even though she knew what it was going to do. It had nothing to do with humanity, and she just like aired out dirty laundry. And then when
I love characters like that.
Yeah, and she's cool. It's just like, and then later on when Beast got back, I'm like, wow, you are that depressed that you went back to the woman who not ruined his life, just made his life really hard.
Mm-hmm. I really like characters that, you know, do things that you'd rather they didn't, you know?
Right.
I just find it interesting.
What are your favorite arcs? I mean, like, personally for me, Phalanx Covenant. I think it was so cool the way you set it up. You took out the main X-Men cast off the top. And it had to be, like, I remember how it started. Banshee didn't know what was going on. He was talking to Emma Frost. She seemed like she was talking crazy. And then, like, it was just such a motley crew. And then they had to go, you had Sarah Sue looking after children. That is terrifying.
Yeah, no, it was fun. It was, I liked, when you say Final Comment, it was, you know what's funny was that was the moment that in my career, my writing career, that working with Joe was so amazing, Joe Madureira.
Yeah.
That scene with Banshee where he's like, let me talk to who's ever in the mansion. And it's like, no, let me talk to Storm. He's like, Storm's not in the mansion. He's like, Gambit Bishop. They're like, not in the mansion. He's like, who's in the mansion? They're like, you. And I was like, oh my God. And so I turned that page in and there's so little writing on it. And the editor handed it back and go, you gotta, like, you know, you need more. I go, no, you don't need more. It's right there. Like, look at what he did. Like, I don't want to use the Caption-O-Matic 3000 on it. Like,
right.
You know, Ben, you know, and so, and after that, I was like, wow, I really, you know, like, I think that was really my big break from how much I had been, you know, because, you know, following Chris loves captions, you know. And so when I first followed him, I did feel that it's almost like writing Shakespeare, you know, if you're going to write Romeo and Juliet 2, you know, you're not going to be like,
you're not going to be,
you know,
modern.
having them, you're going to have them talk like they talk. And it wasn't until later on, I mean, Chris will tell you that I never got it, probably.
What?
And you know, like with, I mean, Forge and Storm breaking up was a really good example. When I had them break up, because I was like, when it was finally clear that I was going to be writing the book, I was like, there's just too many characters. Like, you know, there's just too many of them for a 20-page book, 22-page book every month. And so I was like, you know, Forge, what does he do? He's not, you know, like every once in a while, like I didn't even know his. And then when I got rid of him, people were like, oh, that's the greatest love of her life. And I'm like, he hasn't been in the book in like 3 years. Like, you know, like she doesn't think about, you know, like he wanders on for crossovers. But so that was, I mean, I don't know why I brought that up, but I guess Chris will tell you that I never got it. Chris will tell you that, like, you know, Forge and Storm should never have been parted and da-da-da. But there's so much stuff that Chris and I think even X-Men fans had taken for granted after that 17-year run that I was looking at it with a new set of eyes, and I felt like I had to, you know,
things change happens.
Choices,
you're all about change. And I reread that.
It's so funny. I got X-Men. Bob used to tell me all the time, whenever I'd be like, in fact, I'll tell you about one time, but I'm like, and we were walking, he puts his arm around me in the office and he goes, Scott, change is good. Change is good. And so I got him a t-shirt once that said change is good, and he wore it to an X-Men conference. But
one thing I really liked about how you did that whole breakup is Forge asked Storm to marry him and she hesitated and he was like, bye, and he left. I love, like,
well, you want to,
so funny.
You want to hear something crazy since you brought that up? Is I wanted to set it up so that he would propose the next issue, and Wills was like, "I don't want to do that." And I go, "Well, you're leaving. You're leaving to start Image, so
yeah,
it doesn't matter what you want to do." And so he's like, "Okay." So he waited till the very last second, and he turned in these pages that weren't what I asked for, and he knew that he had screwed me over because there was no way we're going to send those pages back and send them back to me.
Right.
So I'm looking at them and I'm like, well, there's no background on these pages. So they're just standing next to each other talking. So if I move this and I move that and move this, and then I had him propose in that issue so that instead of Wills tying my hands, I tied Wils's hands because the next issue came by and he'd already proposed. So it's pretty fun, but it was like,
that is so
cool. We were laughing. He called me up. He goes, "Oh, you got me." I go, "Yeah, I got you." So.
What I really like about your stuff is it feels like, well, like we said, it feels like a TV show and with a movie that comes in later. But you had all these character interactions, and you really felt that these people were friends. You would like you saw, like, I remember in Execution Song, you had Iceman hang out with Colossus going grocery shopping. Something like, up until then, I've never seen them in the same panel before.
Oh yeah. That was fun to mingle them up. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just so like, the gold and blue teams. I noticed, like, when Chris was on his way out, you kind of blended them together. Was that intentional, or was that like, okay, I just want one big cast?
I don't remember that being a discussion, like I say, I mean, if you look at what, it's funny because even if you look at like Executioner's Song and blah, 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 like I get these pages that say, this is what has to happen in your issue, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, I'll do that to hit so that the next part of the story is there. But, what, to me, the best part of Executioner's Song, the two best parts, if I may, is I loved Xavier's speech when he was talking about, prejudice against mutants and everybody else. And then at the end with Jubilee rollerblading with Charles and, and the Beast and Angel repairing Harry's hideaway that night, and Rogue on the rooftop saying, well, you'll never be able to touch me, there's nothing here, we can't have a relationship. And then Gambit goes and leaves, and she's like, I was right. He comes back with the blanket and he throws it over her, cool. So like those were, like, to me, like, all these huge things were going on, but what I always thought was the most vital in all the crossovers were those moments, because that's what because otherwise you're just seeing 30 characters run on this way and then 30. I used to call it the wallpaper, like in the old days when two characters would meet, it was like, holy moly, like Thor and Doctor Strange, what is that about? Right. They're in the same panel, like there's like things happen. And then after, probably after Secret Wars, it was just like, Spider-Man would swing in the room and every Avenger in the world was there, and they'd be like, hi. And it was like, there's, we lost that ability. Like Jack of Hearts is standing next to Tigra. Yeah. Oh my God, that's what I want to, I want to know what's happening there. Right. What is that about?
One thing I wish they did more, in, like, I also, in your books, I wish we would have saw the first interactions between characters. Like, how did say Generation X, what was Generation X when they first met X-Force? Did they say, oh, wow, this is the older us, or wow, they're old?
Yeah. Or is this like our future? We're going to be running around fighting and, with a cable and blah, 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 like, yeah.
Yeah, it just like, and the way you write your books, like what you just did with that the proposal, it's kind of like you're a director of a movie. You're like, okay, I could take this and I can put it here. I could take this and I can put it here, here, and here, and just see what happens. You're editing your own stuff. Man, it's amazing.
You know, it's funny you say that, because when I got to Hollywood, I had a few meetings, and I sold a bunch of stuff right off the bat.
Cool.
And anytime I'd sell something, they go, all right, well, we got to find a writer to write this. And I'd be like, well, I can write it. And they're like, oh no, you're a comic book writer. And I'm like,
what does that mean?
Is there a vault somewhere with secret words that only screenwriters have access to? Like, maybe you could show me these magical words and I could figure out some way to take my humble comic book writing skills and somehow figure out how to do a screenplay, you know. But then I finally wrote a screenplay on spec, and when I sold the next thing I'd written, I said, I want to write it. And they go, well, can you write? And they said, well, here. And they showed them the spec script, and they said, okay, you can write this. So, and then I became a screenwriter. But it was, you know, but it's funny that you say that, because all the skills that I had developed as a comic book writer are essential to screenwriting. You know, trying to, you know, and you don't want to have like six, unless you're Tarantino, you don't want to have like 6 pages of people talking to each other. And he can do that because he's so,
he knows how to grab the audience.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
But that,
he knows how to grab the audience with the conversation. Like, you want to.
Oh yeah, that scene with the Nazis in the farmhouse that time.
Oh yeah. My God.
He's like, I would like some milk, please. And you're, this is very good. And you're like, you know, so he could do it, but most people.
Man, that was a scary scene. But like, you were like,
oh my God.
Does he know they're under there?
Oh, so creepy. Yeah.
Okay. Generation X. What was the idea going into that? Because like, you did Phalanx Covenant, you brought in these new mutants. Like, I personally, I didn't care about the new mutants. I was like 8. I thought, these are the kids. Like, I love Chamber was my favorite character. You made them all various ages that Marvel ignores now.
What'd you say?
You made all the kids various ages. Like, you made Chamber
2
years old, Jubilee was like 13, and everybody else was like 15, 16 years old. And
yeah,
I really
and I also, you know, there's also the Barbie and Ken aspect to the X-Men, not to disparage them, but, you know, like, if Bobby never used his powers, he would have a great life. If Jean never used her powers, she would have a great life. It's like, you know, and to me, I really wanted to explore what happens when your entire chest cavity is blown away. What happens when the skin is dripping off your body? You know, what happens when, you know, everything you touch is like razor blades, like with penance?
Yeah.
You know, what about Husk? The only way she can use her powers is to rip her skin off. It's like, you know, like, that's what fascinated me, was like this new generation of kids that couldn't just randomly go, you know, I'm just going to live my life and I'm not even going to worry about being a mutant. I mean, probably Jubilee and Monet were probably the two that could easily walk away from it, but they weren't going to walk away from their headbutting with each other either. So.
Oh, that was so much fun. The fact that you just made them just like go at each other. and you
know, it's funny because that was the thing that I missed about, like, you know, one time we're at this writers conference and they said, well, what do you think of the X-Men? And people are like, well, you know, like, Wolverine's like the cranky uncle, and Kurt's like the cousin, and they're all the family. Everybody comes, oh, they're family. They're family. I'm like, oh my God, who wants to spend time with their family? Like, you know, like, that made me so, you know, like, I miss, like, when I first started reading the X-Men, you know, Storm was walking around without her clothes on by the pool, and everybody's like, whoa, hey, throw some clothes on. You know, it's like, you know, Wolverine was carving his, I mean, they kept calling him Runt, and even though he's a homicidal maniac, they keep poking him, you know, and it was like, you know, that's what I liked. And so I wanted to make sure with Generation X that I wasn't creating a group of people that all loved each other right off, you know, like they were,
Yeah.
trying to figure it out. And so, and that's the stuff like Operation Zero Tolerance and Eve of Destruction. That was all about trying to bring in characters that would rub up against each other. So because it just gotten it's gotten so boring that nobody has any friction anymore.
And one thing I really appreciated is how you brought in real world racism in the X-Men. Like I remember at the end of X-Men Prime, you had Dennis Hogan. He was beaten, like hate crimed right outside of the school, and the X-Men got there like what, a couple minutes afterwards. And like none of the other comic books were doing that. I was like, because I read X-Men, I'm black. I'll try to see, like, do the X-Men deal with regular racism, or is this like a super racism or whatever? But I just loved how you did that. You showed like we have a really bad life because we're mutants. And
well, I just remember, I think it was maybe 299 or whatever. Like, there's it's the issue with the hostages where the Brotherhood, the Acolytes show up, and it's like it's a typical X-Men like race for the new mutant. Let's find the new mutant, and so they race there. And I thought, well, what happens if if the Acolytes are like, oh, we want the mutant, but we don't want that kind of mutant. That's not, and suddenly it's like, well, wait a minute, are you the supremacist, standing up for mutants, or do you have your own personal layers of prejudice on top of it? And so for them to find this Down syndrome kid and go, we're just going to kill him. We don't want him in the gene pool. And then the X-Men go, what the heck? And so like I loved, it's like with Bobby, Bobby had a cranky father, but I love the idea of making Bobby love his father, who was just straight up a bigot towards Bobby, and mutants in general. And his feeling is like, can you just, in fact, there's a line that's probably the only line I had that made it into the X-Men movies, but when the father was like, can you just not be a mutant? Like, can you just not, and he's like, no, I can't, this is who I am. And so it was like, like I loved always playing, pushing you tell me, like I liked pushing the metaphor more than I liked, like I always pushed the idea that Bobby and his father's relationship was a metaphor for having a gay son. And, and then I believe it was Bendis came by and was like, oh no, Bobby's gay. And it's like, okay, well, that's like a little on the nose, like it's not, I just felt like there was so much that we could use with, with metaphors, than to just come out and be like, because then I don't know, you tell me. I mean, what do you think? I mean, because I think I did like that scene with Professor X in the park when he does that speech, and he's like, there's everybody uses names for everybody, and what's it mean? And it's, like, I love that.
Well, you're right. I saw that that same story in a Generation X book too, Generation X4, I think, where that like they're going to town, there was this whole hostage situation.
The Christmas issue, yeah,
the Christmas issue, yeah. And then you find out the kid just got burned, and like, what else could they were like, we can't really do anything, so I guess, like,
yeah.
And I don't know, I love the metaphor. I love the X-Men metaphor. I always thought, like, the whole thing with Bobby and his father, hey, not everybody has a great relationship with their parents. I got that, understood that. And then like later on when they said, oh, Bobby's been gay the entire time, I'm like, really? Wait, when was this going on? Like, but then
like I said, I would push the metaphor, but it was just too on the nose, I think.
Crazy.
But it's interesting to me, not to get too deep here, but like,
let's get deep.
And again, it's hard for me to comment on other people's writing that I haven't read, but I will.
Yeah, yeah. It's in your queue.
Like when gay people were experiencing AIDS in the 90s, like as a slur, we've always heard like, hey, if you don't like America, go, start an island. You should go on the island somewhere.
Right.
And it was always a slur. It's like that. No, that's not what America is about. It's not the world. It's not what living your life as a human being is about. We're inherently joined in the human experience. So the idea of like, so that was wrong.
Right.
And then a few years ago, some X-Men writer was like, hey, let's have an island and they'll all go to the island. And it's like, no, that's the exact opposite of,
They're doing that now.
Yeah, I know. That's what I mean. And I look at it and
this is the second time it's happened though.
What's that?
This is the second time they've had an island though.
Right. Didn't they do whatever once, right? They did
Utopia.
San Francisco.
Yeah, it happened like 13 years ago. They had their own island off the coast of San Francisco. And they were
yeah.
I thought that was cool. But like you said, they did isolate themselves because there was only a few of them left. They were trying to make themselves into an endangered species. And I understand that, but like they did isolate themselves. But at some point, the X-Men have tried to extend their hands to humanity, and they spat in their face each and every time. I mean,
when which you said?
The way the X-Men have tried to extending their hand to humanity, saying like, let's do this together. And humanity each and every time has spit in their face.
Mm-hmm.
Like Project
Which is a choice though. I mean, it's a choice that a writer makes.
Yeah. Okay.
And I don't, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. It's like, I just, I don't know. Like I like the X-Men when they're like to me, I'll give you an example. Like, I don't think the X-Men ever works when Xavier's not in the group, like when I would read Chris's stuff and it's like, oh, we're all in Australia now and no one can see us on the TV. It was like, like I want Xavier at the center, like Xavier is this leader of this movement to integrate humans and, to protect mutants, but to also protect humans, to live in a world that fears and hates us and blah, 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 as opposed to, oh, we're going to go over here and start our country. Like I like, like I say, to me, like the more, like when we see like Operation Zero Tolerance, like you have Cecilia, who is a nurse, and Bobby breaks in. He's like, come on. And she's like, what? And he's like, I know you're mutant. You have to come with me. And then she's like, look, I'm a doctor. Like I save lives. And now all of a sudden I'm going to be on the run with you. Like, what the heck? Like I made a deal with Xavier 10 years ago when he came to visit me. He said, you have mutant powers. And I told him I don't want any part of it. It was like, to me, like the grounding, like getting the X-Men on the ground and in the world and in the moment, I think is when they were the best. And so when, like when they're living in Australia and no one could see them, and it's like, like that's not, but that's just me, I could write that X-Men forever, so.
Okay, you mentioned Eve of Destruction, also a favorite of mine. You had taken over, and correct me if I'm wrong, you had taken over for like a short stint right before they were going to move over to Morrison, and you had Cyclops so cool. Like there was so much. You were like, he was becoming less. He was becoming more rounded, and he was becoming more of a more rounded person. And I remember you had Wolverine. He's like, I don't like it. It's like, I don't like the fact that he's so cool. He's showing off, and he's like, I don't like it. And I wanted to, like, if you would have stayed on X-Men past that, what would you have done?
I don't know, but I think what I wouldn't have done is, and I think it happens with writers all the time when they come in, and I'm sure that people look at my Teen Titans and everything and be like, well, you didn't follow that, but that was a little different because it was New 52.
Mhm.
But like everybody, not everybody, it just seems like the way to make a character cool is to make him an asshole in most people's eyes. It's like, Beast, Beast's kind of boring because he found, let's make him an asshole,
Yeah.
Xavier is too good. Let's make him an asshole. It's like, like you don't have to go to, Cyclops became an asshole for a while. Didn't he kill? Is he the one that killed Xavier, right? At one point?
All right. Technically, he was good. Cyclops was goated because Cyclops, like Xavier's telling him, you're such a disappointment. You failed me. You were da-da-da. And it's like, really? Like he's the one who hasn't gone Dark Phoenix.
Right. And that's the thing, is like they just, I think writers come onto a book and they're like, oh, I'm going to make him do that. But in this example, like I wanted Scott to be cool. Like Scott's the leader of the X-Men. He should be, he should have all the answers. He should, no offense to that great Chris Claremont, Rick Leonardi bit, but like, when Mohawk Storm took out Cyclops,
yeah,
it was like, come on.
Exactly.
He wanted to leave. He's like, sure, okay.
He's like, oh God, no. I remember reading that and just everything that led up to it. Madeline Pryor went to Storm and said, how can we raise a baby here? It's like, Xavier just left and you want to go? And then just how Storm, like, I don't understand the mindset of Storm under Claremont. She's like, oh, I'm going to take over the X-Men because I feel I should do it. I'm like, really?
Yeah. And it's like,
this could have been a conversation.
You don't have any powers anymore. Why don't you go back to where you were and just live your life,
No, but
and then don't even get me started on the Morlocks. I mean, what a concept.
Oh my, yes.
We're all mutants. We believe in the sanctity of all mutants. But if you want to live in the sewers, what are we going to do about it?
I every time somebody says something about Storm, like, oh, she's a great character, I'm like, remember the Morlocks? She didn't do anything.
Like, no, you can.
Like,
I killed your leader. I'm your leader. Take care.
And then she got mad at
wanted
Marrow.
Somebody to go. I wanted somebody to go, excuse me, do you mind? Would you mind if we came back with you? What? To the mansion? Could we come back to you with the mansion? Because we're living in sewers. And she's like, you know what? It's Xavier's house. So not really up to me to be bringing in sewer people to the house. But if it were my house, sure.
And then you're like,
terribly.
It's like you lie. No, with Storm, I always go like, everybody likes to make her seem like she's infallible, like she's perfect. Like, no, she's kind of like what she did with Marrow was messed up. Like she ripped out her heart and then tried to stonewall her at every chance she got when Marrow joined the X-Men. I thought like Marrow had every reason to be angry at Storm.
Yeah.
Every reason,
but just be angry in life. Yeah.
And then Storm sent Wolverine. She put a hit on Marrow. Said, Wolverine, take care of her. Get her out of here. And I don't know.
I tried. She's like, I tried to rip her heart out. That didn't work. So
yeah, but Marrow,
you get her other heart.
But Marrow beat Wolverine. That's something she can always carry with you. Like, I kicked your ass, Wolverine. Can't say nothing. You can say, oh,
it's funny. It's funny because Marrow was I don't know, people probably don't notice, but over the years I always tried to get rid of one thing and replace it with something else.
Mm-hmm.
So like an example is when Bob came to me and said, hey, Upstairs wants to redo the New Mutants. Do you want to do it? And I said, well, let me think about it. And over the weekend, I thought about Generation X and I'm like, oh my God, this is so cool. And so I went back on Monday and I said, I want to do New Mutants, but I don't want to call it New Mutants. I want to be something different. I don't want them to be at the mansion. I want him to be at Emma's Boston Academy.
Right.
And it was like, what? And it's like, well, so Emma's going to teach you? I said, yeah, Emma and Banshee. And they're like, what? So like they get, so to me, it was like, same thing with the Morlocks. Like we've already seen the Morlocks. So when I first got on, I had to do a Morlock story because that was part of the Jim Wells thing. Mm-hmm. But when it came time, Bob's like, oh, we got to use the Morlocks again. I'm like, and so then I was thinking, okay, the gay movement at the time was Queer Nation. We're here, we're queer, get used to it. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, so what's the version of that? And I'm like, okay, well, Gene Nation, like characters that are saying, hey, we're not going to hide, we're not going to live in the sewers anymore, screw that. Yep. Well, who thinks that's a good idea? And so I remember I was in St. Mark's Comics in New York, and they had these steps, and there was all these kids around, and there was this girl there, and she was completely pierced, mm-hmm. And this like, I don't know, 17-year-old girl. Mm-hmm. Just all these piercings. And my first thought was, oh, that's unfortunate. But I got inside, I'm looking at comics all of a sudden, I'm like, oh my God, like that's Mara. Like Mara came to me
just like
instantly, because I'm like, here's a girl who, has bones growing out. She's in pain, she's in agony, and she's lashing out, and she, she's learned to use these bones, she can pull a bone out of her head. Oh my God, it was horrible. And, to me, like that girl on the steps triggered this idea of like, this is, and I knew who Mara was instantly, which doesn't always happen. So,
that's cool.
But that's the thing is like, I love the, the grounded stuff, but I also love, like you say, like what would I have done? Like I don't know, like I say, Sentinels. It's like, oh, we got to do a Sentinel story. I'm like, my God, no more Sentinel stories, please. And so that's when I came up with Phalanx. Mm-hmm. I said, let the Phalanx come down, and they could be these mechanical guys that respond to everything. And so it was always like, how to trade off what we've seen and do something else,
Right.
But
man.
Like that was the point of bringing in Exodus. Although Exodus never really took off, so.
Exodus is so cool to me. I'm like he's a French knight. They don't really explain how he got to this time. They just like gloss over it. But like
I think that must have been Fabian's. Yeah, that must have been Fabian's contribution. I don't remember.
Yeah, I feel like Exodus was always Magneto Cyclops.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, and that's the idea. And then for a while I tried to. I thought it'd be really cool if Alex became his Magneto.
Yeah.
The same way that Xavier had, his brother Eric, mm-hmm. Who he loved, and they started off with this idea together. And I thought, oh, what would because Alex was always kind of a jerk, so why not have the two of them, become the next generation of that, But
that was really like.
But then people get angry. People get so angry,
People get angry.
Like I remember when Storm, one of the first issues I did on my own with Forge, and Storm cried in that issue of her crying in the rain.
Yeah, I love
cover
that.
of her, the classic cover.
That's my first one.
And this was before the internet, and people would send letters, and then be like, Storm would never cry. I'm like, Storm would never cry? Like, who is this woman? This is a woman that would never cry, Like she's in love, but she wouldn't cry because, when
but she's so hardened inside because of her physical, like, I don't know, it's weird. She would totally cry.
And I'm like, yeah. And so it was, but so people would get mad, like you start to change things and people would start to, in fact, I'll tell you this funny story if I may, is, this is a behind the scenes thing, but somebody had told me that all white characters never last, in the sense of like Silver Surfer comes and goes, and Moon Knight comes and goes, and and they said, that's why Bobby is so boring, because he's just this like slab of white in the center of the page. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I went to Bob and I said, Bob, I want to do something with Iceman, like real, like give him spikes, like let him like use him almost the same way that whatever used Sandman. Yeah, the same way Sandman was used,
Okay.
like just, I mean, he's ice, he should be able to do anything.
Right.
And so he goes, we can't do that because it's a toy and we can't change it. So we can't change it. And I said, okay. So then I plotted and I did this issue where Emma takes over Bobby's mind.
Right.
And it's like, oh my God, this is awesome. I can do anything I want. And then afterwards, Bobby feels like a schmuck because he's like, I could do all that. Like, I've been living at my bare minimum, like throwing snowballs at people. Like, this is terrible. And 2 or 3 months after that, Bob comes down and says, yeah, the toy people want to turn that version into toy. So if you want to play around with him more, and I was like, okay. So I'm like, okay, if we can't do it because he's a toy, well, then let's make a new toy.
Right.
Let's make a new toy off of this character. So it's one of those behind the scenes. You're getting all the behind the scenes stories today.
I love it. One thing I really like, I'm glad you brought up Iceman. Iceman was one of my favorite characters. And when you put him with Cannonball, I thought, oh my, these two just came together like peanut butter and jelly. Like they
were great too.
Yeah, I was like, and I remember this one letters page where somebody was asking, why is Iceman, why are Iceman and Cannonball getting along so well? And it's like, because Iceman knows what it's like being the youngest person on the team. He was that for a long time. And so he's playing big brother or just being a friend, like, sure, like, hey man, it's not even, don't even worry about it. It's cool. And Cannonball, one of my favorites. With X-Men 54. Sorry.
No, X-Men 54, what were you saying?
X-Men 54, when right before Onslaught started, you had Cannonball go to Xavier and saying, you know what, maybe I shouldn't be here, because I feel like I did more with X-Force. And the way you had Xavier cut him down, like, oh, yo, you want to go back to whatever you want in X-Force? Grow up. That's essentially what I'm like, wow.
Yeah, it's probably the Wesley Crusher syndrome, But what's funny is that like I loved the first chance I got to use Sam. I was like, oh my God, this is perfect. Like you're in a group and suddenly you get, you're like, you are the captain of a local baseball team in Idaho. And suddenly it's like, oh no, you're with the X-Men now. And he's like, what the heck? Like I love that. I loved it. Like I loved his Southern family background. I mean, it was like perfect for this kind of like, oh my God, I'm here now. And what was interesting, it was like, I would, again, it was letters at the time and people were angry and they're going like, you're ruining him because you're saying he's not powerful anymore and he's just a kid. I go, and in my head, I'm like, I never said he wasn't powerful. Like he's just suddenly around his idols, like suddenly he can't.
It was a mental thing.
It was a mental thing for him. Yeah, and so that's why the Christmas issue happened because I'm like, you want to see how strong Cannonball is? Well, Cannonball is going to take on the most powerful
Superman
in the Marvel universe. So then tell me how unpowered Cannonball is. Then we'll have that conversation.
The way I always looked at it, it was kind of like similar to you. Cannonball was the big fish leading X-Force, and X-Force was so cool because the X-Men at one time were really considering taking them down. They were really, and then like having Cannonball join, like whose decision was that? Did you like, okay, I want Cannonball, I want to put him on X-Men, or did Jeff Loeb just kind of like write him out? What was it?
I think it might, if I recall, it's a combination of things. I think that the idea was that X-Force had gotten reliant on the same thing. Like the last big shot in the arm before that was Cable joining, you know? And so I think the idea was we were looking at it going, well, all right, let's take, what happens if we remove Cannonball? And who steps up and what happens then? And, you know, and then I was like, okay, so what does this new character bring to the mix? Like even we were talking before about Eve of Destruction, you know, like to have, you know, after 20 years or 10 years or whatever it was, you know, I mean, North Star comes out of the closet and then no one ever hears from him again, you know? I was like, so the idea is taking him and putting him on the team, but then putting him on the team with Paulie Provenzano, who is like,
right.
you know, the meathead from Brooklyn, who's like, whatever, you know, and,
right?
you know,
Sopranos.
Yeah, and the first time he sees North Star, he's like, hey, listen, I'm not going to be on the team with no fruit.
Right.
And North Star just beats the crap out with, like, you know, like that was like, I always loved changing the dynamics. Like, you know, Operation Zero Tolerance, you had Bobby, who suddenly gets teamed up with Sabra, who is this Israeli Mossad agent who's like, you know, super. I always loved that character from the first time she appeared in Contest of the Champions. And I was like, I'm determined to make her so cool. And then suddenly he's leading a team with somebody who could like kick his ass, you know, like, you know, and he's meanwhile holding on to Cecilia's hand and trying to get her through. I mean, it's like, so I loved like always mixing up the group, and anytime I could. So that was, in fact, I'll tell you the truth is this is another behind the scenes thing, is that I fought tooth and nail to not get, Sabretooth was going to be on the team. And I was like, no, I said, that's like crazy. Like, you know, that's like totally gutting the character. And Fabian's like, no, it'd be cool. People love Sabretooth. It'd be like a new Wolverine. I'm like, he wouldn't even be the new Wolverine. He'd be the old, he'd be Wolverine. Be like Wolverine looking at Wolverine saying, hey, Wolverine, how are you? Good, Wolverine, how are you? And so I really fought it. And then, and Bob was like, oh, no, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And then I'm like, I said, but, you know, he can't, you know, Xavier's not going to be able to work him through his issues. And Bob's like, well, maybe that's the story. Maybe Xavier finally meets somebody that he can't help and he can't change. And all of a sudden it's like, well, that's interesting. And then I said, well, what if he comes to, what if he does, he's in the X books, but he doesn't join the team. They keep him down in the basement, you know, and then like, okay, all right, that's good. And so then I'm like, okay, now I know what that story is. I can write that story. I couldn't write, you know, him like being Uncle Victor, you know.
Oh, in the way I remember. Thank you for bringing up Sabretooth, because what you did with Psylocke, when he broke out, he was, I don't remember him being that scary. And then,
well, and that's the thing. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to make, and I didn't want him gutted. I didn't want him to be like, you know, yeah, he should be scary. I mean, Sabretooth is, you know, it should be like, you know, Sabretooth is in the house, you know.
Like who?
You know?
It should be like, dude, like Sabretooth's in the house. Okay, get the bat. Get the bat and get out of the house.
Yeah, and poor Boomer, who really thought like, oh, I'm reaching him. And so.
Yeah, she really tried. But when like Sabretooth played them all like saps. He played.
Well, like you say, like what's her name? Like Trish. Like I love when characters make mistakes or they do things for the wrong reasons. Like to me, that's so powerful, you know. And you know, and the fact that Psylocke, I mean, what was cool was by making Sabretooth so scary, it made Psylocke so cool. You know, like when she went up against him, it was like, you know, she kicked Boomer out of the way and she's like, get out. And it was like,
I just saw that. I just saw that at like a movie. Like somebody comes in, they pose like, go get out of here, I got this. And like and Betsy was kicking his ass for a quick minute. And then as soon as she hit that, he's like, hey, ever since that runt put that claw on my head, the glow don't work no more. It did just slashed her. Like, that was a horror movie. I'm like, oh my God.
That was brutal.
Oh, okay. Also with Psylocke. You made this decision to put her and Archangel together. Really cool.
Yeah.
I kind of saw it like that happened out of nowhere though. What was the reasoning behind that?
I think they were both two mutants who had their entire bodies taken from them, sort of, like, so, all Angel had to define him was his wings, and suddenly had these mental death wings, and Psylocke went through the siege perilous and, came out as an Asian woman, try doing that today.
Oh, no, it's really, no, sorry, real quick. It's really funny how, like, we was writing, like, a British woman, a Japanese woman who's British. I'm like, okay, so you never heard of Japanese British people?
Yeah. How odd.
Right.
But it was like, I mean, as near as I know, she was the only person who ever stepped through the siege. Like, Colossus didn't step through and be, a 14-year-old girl from,
Harlem,
Madagascar or something, like, why, he didn't lose his Russian accent and become, it was like, so to me, and they were both brought up rich, which, put them in a position where they, had what they wanted, they didn't want for anything, and suddenly both their bodies had been, they were sort of, two rape victims that, like, leaned on each other for support. And then, so to me, I looked at that and I thought, like, who else would they be with, so.
I always kind of thought that, like, because of the mansion, because there was like 16 X-Men at the time, if Art and Psylocke and Archangel, I always thought they were really secretive, that they wouldn't tell anybody at first. And like, Betsy and Warren were seeing each other telepathically, because if they were to do a rendezvous, Wolverine could smell it, or like somebody would see something. So my thought is they had mental dates, and then once they got used to each other, then they announced it, and everyone's like, "What the hell happened?"
That's a fun idea. I'm gonna steal that someday.
Hey, do it, man. I just love the X-Men. Like, I always there's a bunch of things that I think about that nobody else does. Like, when you leave the school, does Xavier give you some money? Because essentially you're broke. Like, with
like, is there Xavier credit card that they all use? Yeah,
exactly. Like, when you get to the school, how is the money work? Or like, are you given an allowance? Like, how does that, like, a bunch of stuff.
Well, that was the thing too, is like, like, I felt that Operation Zero Tolerance, to me, when you say, like, what would I have done, I would have kept, I really wanted to keep this notion that, like, the X-Men had it so easy, like, I don't know if this ever happened, but my early memories of the X-Men is like, when Xavier died, like, the 5 of them had to show up in like a Volkswagen or something. Like, how are we going to get there? Like, that was, to me, like, that was what was cool. Like, the Avengers had the Quinjet. The X-Men were lucky if they could hitchhike, like, who's going to pick up these 5 kids? And to me, like, Operation Zero Tolerance was about stripping them, getting rid of Cerebro, getting rid of the Blackbird, getting rid of the mansion, like, just like all these things that they had become so dependent on. I wanted to just wipe it out. And, and I remember at the time, it's like, well, what does that mean? I go, I don't know. Let's find out. Let's put them in a position. And then, the instant that I left, they, Grant, God bless him, had
opened the school. They made them
open school, and suddenly there's like 600, 700 mutants, and
That's
and then
expensive.
Joe Casey did that bit with where there's mutant rock, and it's infecting the kids are listening to mutant rock. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that was like, to me, that was the complete opposite way to go. Like, I mean, I think No More Mutants was a terrible idea, but I do, and you can either write it so that there's a mutant in every single town.
Mhm.
Like Genosha is a perfect example. Like they were like, when Chris came up with Genosha and it was a slave population, it's like, what does that mean? Like, is there like a slave butler? Like, oh, I have the ability to hold this tray
Right.
and not spill anything.
I'm a
So I'm going to become
telekinetic
a
butler.
butler.
I'm a telekinetic
Like
butler.
what is that? Like anytime they would expand it too much, I was like, let's get it down to, like mutants should be relatively a rare phenomenon, I think.
Right.
And then when they start like, like when you're opening up a school or record labels are coming out with me, like I understand why they did it, but it's just not the direction I would have.
It's not that. I like one thing I also really liked about when you stripped school, because when all the X-Men came back, they were like, because Cyclops had that bomb in his chest, and Jean was like, "Okay, get the medevac done." What the hell's going on? Like, what happened in that house? And also, the government took all their stuff, and the government never gave it back. That's one. Yeah, I always thought about, like, shouldn't the government have given their stuff back eventually? Like, what are they doing? Man, it was. Even if you had X-Men now, what would you do with it?
I don't know. We'll probably see in this new series I'm doing called The Anybody's. It's that Kickstarter that I did with Brett Booth. And it comes out in March. But the idea behind Anybody's is that there's this guy who has the ability to trigger your mutant power for 1 year. And he doesn't ask, he just comes up and he's like, boom, your superpowers are working now, you're working for me. So it's sort of like Professor X, but without consent, and it's this group of characters, and you have like, when we first meet them, there are 3 characters who are have been doing this for the last like 8 months. And now they're looking at the next 4 months and what does that mean? And, what happens when we go back to living our regular lives, and what did we screw up when we were doing this? And then suddenly you have this new girl who is there. And the 5th member of the team is this, I don't know, I wouldn't say he's not Wolverine, but he's feral when we meet him. And what happened is like, the Edgerton can get a sense of your powers and who you're going to be, but he doesn't know exactly. So sometimes he's touched people and they become super villains or whatever. So he's touched this guy and he's triggered this power, but he's like, the weasel from Suicide Squad?
Yeah.
Yeah, so imagine that meets Sabretooth. Like it's this creature that the guy is like, listen, I screwed up. So he's in the basement. I feed him, I slip the food under the door and he's eating. And in the next issue that comes out, the new girl is going to meet this character. And while everybody is disgusted by him, he's the only one she bonds with. So suddenly they become almost a duo in this team with the other 3 who are like on their way up. So it's going to be but I mean, it's as close to writing the X-Men that I will probably ever get, which is fine. I mean, I have no, in fact, it was funny. Fabian called me up about, I don't know, maybe it's I guess a year ago. I remember I was out back. And he goes, I got to tell you something. And it's kind of good news for me, but you won't be happy. And I said, well, what is it? And he said, well, they're doing this X-Men Legends book where they're going to the old X-Men writers and they're saying, what story do you want to do that you didn't get to do? And he goes, so I'm doing this. And, and I go, and what? And he's like, well, I know you won't be happy because they won't ask you.
Yeah.
And I said, Fabian, I don't even spend a minute of my days pining away to write the X-Men, and certainly not writing, a story that I wrote
20 years ago.
Generation X is 20 years ago, Like how lonely would I have to be sitting around being like, I want to write, I can't wait till they call me back. I'm going to do my Generation X story. I never got to tell. It's like, no, I don't, I don't think about it, but I do, you know, like, but in this case, with the Anybody's, you know, like they're very grounded. They don't have a jet. They don't have any of this stuff. And so in a way, like, I mean, you tell me, you're reading the X-Men now. Mm-hmm. When I do glance, it feels like fan fiction to me. But the truth is that any writer will tell you that after he leaves the series, everything else is fan fiction.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, exactly.
You know, so I was talking to Reggie Hudlin, and he said, you know, after he left Black Panther, he'll like check in on it, but he's like, fan fiction. It's just fan fiction, you know, which is fine. But my feeling when I was talking to Brett about doing Anybody's is, I said, you know, no one is doing that comic book that I did in the 90s. Mm-hmm. You know, like the X-Men today is not the X-Men from the 90s.
Oh, totally different.
And so my feeling is that I feel like I'm not competing with the X-Men. I'm doing something
completely different.
Different.
It's a whole nother playing field. Oh, they don't even live at the school anymore. They're not even at the school is left. They last I heard, like they have the Sindri are living there, like infesting ants. it's crazy. Like Generation X.
But yeah, so like I said, I mean, I want to be clear. I don't want to contradict myself by saying that, like, you know, like I don't like, to me, I like the core idea of what I was writing at the time and going back to those types of stories mm-hmm. with characters that I like. Mm-hmm. But, you know, and that's the idea behind Anybody's. But I don't want to go back and, you know, pick up. Well, I'll give you an example. Eve of Destruction was supposed to end with Magneto, because you see he's there and the Shield helicarrier.
Yeah.
Something was happening, but they pulled up. I think it was either that or Zero Tolerance, just one of the two. And I remember that I wanted it to end with Magneto ripping the helicarrier in half and everybody dying. And Bobby was just like, holy shit, you just made things so much. It was like 9/11. Like, yeah, right. You have just made things so much worse for every one of us. And so again, like I wanted to keep them grounded. I wanted to keep them on the run. I wanted the government to have a zero tolerance policy against mutants and make that frightening and just keep them on the run. But nobody does any of that stuff anymore. So I'm like, you know what, if no one's doing that, then I'm going to enjoy myself and write that kind of book. And if people miss that, then fine. But I don't want to, if Marvel came to me and said, oh, what do you want to do? Or they came and said, hey, would you do what you were going to do with zero tolerance? I'd be like, I don't have any interest in, doing any of that.
I thought zero tolerance was so good because every book was dealing with it in some way. Like, I think Generation X had the best one to me because they were by themselves. They were kids by themselves, and like they didn't know what was going on. Your X-Men with Iceman had his own little team was so cool. Mm-hmm. Sabra, I always call her Sabra, but like when you introduced her when she was in that car,
oh my god, that was my favorite scene I ever wrote.
Just like she punched through the car, grabs the
pavement.
It just blows. And she was like, "Huh, okay."
All right, now we'll have this fight. I would love to do that in a movie someday. It was so fun.
Oh man, oh my! All right, Gal Gadot could play her easy. She'd be amazing.
Oh my god! Right? Oh wow! And the thing is it only took like one scene. It only took one scene to make her like the baddest of the bad. And she went from like that porcupine costume, with the white and the blue stripe and looking silly, to suddenly being like, holy shit, this is somebody you do not want to.
She had that whole cape. and she looked like she was basically Captain Israel.
Yeah.
She had that cool cape, and she was like, you know what, I'm doing this because my son was killed by extremists. I'm just want to make sure nobody loses their kids. I'm like, all right, hey, I'm with it. I'm with it. All right. Well,
You know what's funny is you said Generation X.
Yeah.
I was going to tell you something interesting about White Queen.
Mm-hmm.
Is when I came up with the idea of using White Queen, you know, Bob would support it, but editorial was like, well, no, because she's bad. She's so evil. She's evil. She's like the evilest character. She's so evil. The Hellfire Club, they're so evil. And I'm like, what has the Hellfire Club ever done except ask an X-Men to join them? And the X-Men goes, no. And they go, okay. You know, it's like, Warren Worthington, you want to be part of the Hellfire Club? It's like, no. Storm, you want to be part of the Hellfire Club? No. Beth, you want to be part of the Hellfire Club? No. It's like, what have they done that was ever evil? You know, the only evil thing they did was turn Jean Grey into Phoenix.
Right.
That was completely by accident. You know, no one would have thought that would be a good idea. And and I just said, I go, what has Emma done? You tell me what Emma has done that's been evil. And to me, the only evil that she did was trying to take these kids and turn them into, like, you know, the anti-X-Men. And then when they died, she was like, holy shit, like, I used them. I used these kids, and I, you know, like, I have all this power and they all died. It was all my fault. And so I was like, oh my God. And so it made perfect sense that she would want to join Generation X and, you know, cheat and steal and do whatever she had to make sure they lived, you know? So.
I'm glad you brought that up, because one issue, I think it was 15, where they're just about to jump into Onslaught, and what she didn't know, she had taken control of all the kids, and just like, hey, I'm gonna just put you guys someplace else because Onslaught's coming. Like, she has that mother hen mentality, but she doesn't really ask anybody like, hey, are you okay with this? Like, no.
You know, she's like, her job was to keep them alive, and, you know, and we were talking, what was it about Emma? The scene when G Nation first appeared, and they Mara was torturing Emma, and she could because what's the name? Artie Leach was right there, and she was like, looks at him, and he's like looking up with his big eyes, and she's like, sorry about this, and she kicks him, and he's knocked unconscious, and then Mara's like, holy shit. But I did that, and then again, an editor came to Bob, you know, you can't have her kicking a kid, like, that is the worst that you can do. I said, well, you know, Banshee kicked a kid, yeah, but this is Emma. You know, like, Emma is like, I am going to win, and this is how I'm going to win. Right. You know, and the kid didn't do with it. She didn't, you know. So, but again, they were like, oh, you have to write her out of the book. I'm like, I'm not going to write her out of the book because she kicked the kid. Like, that's who she is, you know. I wouldn't kick a kid, but she would, you know. So.
I mean, hey, I bit a kid. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, what I like
recently, I hope.
Right, no. What I like with Emma is that she always has these blinders on because she sees her objective. She doesn't care about anybody else's. She just sees her. She's like a one of those racehorses.
Yeah, with the blinders on. Yeah.
Yeah, she doesn't get distracted. She doesn't care about anybody else because she wants what she wants.
Fortunately, what she wanted was to keep them alive, you know.
Yeah. Okay, with Generation X, going back, great. Mondo. What was the original intent with Mondo? Because, like, he just went over to Black Tom. Nobody really knew what was going on. Like, it just kind of like seemed like it was just dropped. Was there more that
well, the truth of the matter is that I was going to bring him in around issue 4 or 5, and then Generation Next happened, and then we're kind of dealing with the fallout. And then before you know it, it was like, oh my God, he's, you know, we pitched him as being part of this team, and I don't really, and so I started working towards this notion of, okay, what if this isn't the character we think it is, and he dies a horrible death, and then Banshee comes across the real Mondo on the beach, and he walks by and he's like, "Hey, how you doing?" And Banshee is like, I've seen the end of this movie. Like, this poor kid is dead because I pulled him into this war that we have. Instead of living your island life, I'm going to bring him out. And so I felt like, okay, I could, again, I could embrace that story because it impacted on Banshee, and it also drove home this point of like, like, to me, and the pitch that I made to Bob was like, I don't want to do New Mutants. I don't want this to be like the next generation of X-Men. I want this to be the next generation of mutants who, if at the end of the day, they decide, I'm going to go to college or whatever, or I'm going to be a doctor, or even I'm going to be a supervillain. It's like, whatever. Like, our goal is to train them and keep them alive. That's all we want to do. We don't want to train them for war. We don't want another, cannon fodder for the next X-Men war. Yeah. Our goal, Banshee, Emma and Sean's goal was to keep them alive and let them make their decisions. Right. And so, to me, the notion of taking what was a poor planning on my part with Mondo and letting Mondo be a cautionary tale for Banshee to like look at and go, like, I don't, why is it my place to pull this kid in? Like, let him live his island life and be happy. And, and it was also, I don't really understand what Larry did with Penance and stuff, but originally M was going to be the twins, and you were going to find out that there were 2 9-year-olds who, one was autistic and one wasn't. And Emma and Banshee were going to go, okay, we can't have you be part of this group because we're not putting a 9-year-old's life at risk. And she would be like, look, when we're together, it's the only way that my sister can experience the world. Right. Like she is no longer autistic when the two of us are together. And I don't want to give that up because you don't think it's fair. Like, we have this power, we use this power, whatever. And then it was also fun to make Jubilee realize that, holy shit, I've been going back and forth with a 9-year-old. Like, it wasn't so much that Monet was like this Wonder Woman with an attitude. It turned out she was just this kind of like bratty 9-year-old. And suddenly Jubilee's like, oh, wait a minute, I should have been the mature one. So that was going to be fun. But then, then I don't know what it turned into, but it was, it wasn't that. But I love the idea of like putting Emma and Sean on the spot and be like, is it our place to say, no, you can't do this? Is it our place to put them at risk? Do we have a right? Do we have a responsibility? And so like that was all,
I kind of saw you did that though with Artie Leach and Franklin Richards when they were brought onto the team after Onslaught. Like they were not part of any of the adventures that were going on. And then on the 25th issue, Artie.
I don't remember when I left and when that, I remember I left at 25, but I don't remember. I remember bringing in Howard the Duck.
Right. Yeah, that was 25.
Okay.
And like.
Oh, so that was my last issue then.
Oh, really? That was your, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. I did. 25 was a good year.
It was hard because Chris had gone on to do. Chris felt he had to go back and finish Death or something he was doing at DC. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of lost the momentum that was Chris and I. Mm-hmm. But I mean, like I
exactly.
I dreamed of writing that book up to 100. Like I wanted to, stay with that book forever. But only because I think that, like, I'll tell you, like I almost hit 100 issues of X-Men. No, probably short. No, it's short. Yeah. But then I did X-Men and Uncanny and blah blah. Yeah. But when I left the X-Men, I remember thinking like, you know, and I don't mean this in any offensive way to Chris or to Peter David or to any of those guys, but like, I didn't want to be that guy that you wheeled away from the desk. They're like, wait, I have one more story to tell. Wait, these are my characters. I love these. Like, I didn't want to be that guy. I didn't, like, I never felt the X-Men were mine. I felt like I was writing the X-Men.
Right.
And so when it was my time to leave, I was like, that's fine. I do think that having a book, having a creative team on a book for like 100 issues, I think that's a good run. 50 issues, that's a good run.
Right.
But I just think that I do think when you're on a book for too long, you start to, run out of ideas, or you start to, have so many subplots that you've left dangling, and So I was like, I was ready to go when it was my time.
Okay, I got like 2 questions, and these are non-X-Men related. My a friend of mine.
Look at my computer screen in my eyes.
Yeah, right.
Oh, wow, I look like a new character. Who should I be? Blue eyes.
Yeah.
My baby's got blue eyes.
Probably an upgraded Douglock.
Oh, that's cool.
I like
Because of my hair? Because of my hair, you bastard?
Hey, yes.
Look like Warlock.
Right. I like Warlock. Warlock, hey, when you guys brought him in as Douglock, I thought, okay, this is cool. And had him on Excalibur. And Excalibur had the best lineups for a minute. Like Colossus on the team, Wolfsbane, Nightcrawler, Shadowcat. Like it was a
the first time I left the X-Men, I was like, as soon as I got off the X-Men, they bought in, Cyclops, Peter, whatever. And I'm like, if we've already seen that, can't we have something nice? Can't we have something different, But
people don't like different. They want the same thing. Now
they want the same thing,
I like, all right, the one question is from a friend of mine. What drew you to Jason Todd as a character to be able to write him for so long?
We both love applesauce.
Fair.
Years ago when I was at Marvel, they asked me to write Elektra. Mm-hmm. And I said, I don't know how to write an assassin. I don't have any, I wouldn't know. I don't like to kill people. I don't want to kill anybody.
Right.
I don't want to not kill anybody. Like, I don't have this urge to I can't fight that word. And so I just had no connection with it. And then when I got over to DC, they had said, I was already writing Teen Titans and Superman, mm-hmm. and they're having issues with with Red Hood and the Outlaws, and they sent me a plot for the first issue, which was like the 6th version of the plot. And I was up late one night and I was reading it. I go, wow. I said, to me, Red Hood and the Outlaws is Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, the movie. It's, these 2 best friends who antagonize each other, and this beautiful girl that, they both have feelings towards, but one of them is going to wind up with her and one of them isn't. And like, I don't know if you've ever seen
I'm a cinephile. That's what.
Okay, so you've seen Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So it opened up at that poker game, mm-hmm. and you and I know that if they were going to do Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid now, they'd be like, well, no, we have to see them get together, and we have to open up. We have to do a scene where, like, Butch is 8 years old and his father gets killed and he shoots him, and then we go, oh, that guy's going to become, because they go, hey, kid, and he said, oh, that's the Sundance Kid, but what was so great about Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, it opened up and they're at in the poker game, and the other one is Butch is scouting the bank and realizing that like the money is all tied up or but it was like boom, like you were there, you were in the movie,
right.
and
Jumping in.
that's what I wanted to do. Like when I looked at Red Hood, I'm like, these two should be best friends. And Jason is always pulling him out of trouble because he has the best intentions, but he's always screwing up. And so once I realized that, oh, this is a story about redemption. This is a story about a guy who has done so many horrible things since he came back to life. Suddenly having friends who aren't, who don't wear a bat on their cape or an R or like, instead of all that stuff that he always deals with, to suddenly have him have friends and people who care about him and him caring about people. It's like, that's a fascinating character. Like, if he was just gonna, if they'd asked me to write a book where, every issue he would toss a duffel bag full of severed heads at people, I'd be like, no, that's, I don't have any interest in doing that. Like I have an interest in taking a character and putting him through the emotional ringer and having him try to come out a better person on the other end. Like that to me is like, and I don't know. I mean, I've done things that I regret, and but I also think that we all do, and that's kind of like where we are in a society where we don't forgive anymore.
Yeah.
We don't say, hey, do better. We say, hey, you're out.
Right.
You're done. There's no redemption. There's no doing better. There's no trying. There's no learning. There's just, go away.
Right.
And
weird.
So to me, to be able to write a character like Jason and have him slowly start to come to realization that, there is another way, I thought that was really, and the idea that he did it through his friends was, I just loved it. I loved writing that character. So I will tell you though, that the last thing that I did when he was going back to Gotham, I had wanted to, if I was going to stay on the book, I was thinking about having go into Gotham, and the next issue he was going to gather all the bats, and he'd be like, they'd all be there, and they're like, okay, Jason, what the hell? They're all like, you never know with Jason, at least in the DC version, you never know when Jason's gonna like pull a gun and kill them all. At least in the DC Universe version, not my version. So I said, let's put them all in the room, and I was going to have him take out his guns and put them on the table. Yeah. And he just lost Bizarro and lost Arsenal and lost Artemis.
Yeah.
And he was going to say, you know what? There's another way. We don't have to kill people. We don't have to beat the shit out of them and throw them in Arkham. We can try to bring peace to them. And so he was going to be like, there's going to be this arc where he was going to be like the Shaolin monk of the Bat family. The one who was like, who would show up and be like, is it necessary to beat him up and, throw him in? Can't we figure out like what's wrong? That's what I wanted to do with him. But
I would have loved to have seen him and Damian, like Jason tell Damian, like, you don't need to hit him. And like Damian's like, I really want to hit him though. It's like, you don't need to. Mm-hmm.
And then for Jason to be the one that's like, no, and
just looks at him funny like, you killed 8 people yesterday.
It's like, that was yesterday. Today's a new day. Every day we have a day. Yeah, I love that scene with Arsenal and where Arsenal's like, hey, let's play football or whatever, and he throws the ball to Damian and it hits Damian. He's like, what was that? He's like, what? I love that scene.
And the second question is, were there any plans for Jason and Artemis?
Can you tell how long we've been talking? Like
2 hours.
You have this great little sunset, and you can see the room's getting darker.
Oh no,
and darker.
I do. This is great. Like, hey, it's New Year's Eve. It's winter.
I have nothing. No one. I have no one.
You have your dogs.
Look.
Hey, that means it's quiet. That
Yeah,
means your
like the
house is,
light.
I can see. Oh, is that billboard just how you put everything in? Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So,
I always,
I'm going to tell you. I don't really tell anybody, but I'm going to tell you is that that Hulk thing that I showed you earlier, the Hulk poster and this.
yeah.
Like I can't seem to enjoy any comic books that pretty much weren't from my youth.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like I don't want to. Like I love the Kirby
mm-hmm.
Wanda.
Yeah.
And I love the Sal Buscema Hulk, and I love Byrne's early Emma. I don't really have any. I don't have anything in that. I shouldn't say that because look right here.
Right.
By the door is my Red Hood jacket.
Oh, that is cool.
But it's only because it's the warmest thing I own, and it's been so cold. And when you walk the dog on the beach, it's really, really cold. And
yeah.
so that's the only. In LA, you don't really have warm things.
No, you do not.
But for the most part, like I don't, I don't have like I've seen writers and stuff in their office, and they have like a Funko of every character, and they have their posters of every book they've done or the highlights or whatever. And like I don't have a Happy Death Day poster. I don't have I don't.
You got your memories of it.
I like to do things and move on. And so I still love comic books, but I love comic books like the early Kirby, that's the stuff I have around my house, which I think is
like I'm with you on that. Like I like the books but in some, like aside from X-Men, it's kind of hard to get into other books. Like I mean, I've been X-Men since I was 7, and I've been a fan the entire time. I'm not like one of these fans say, "Oh, I only like it with this," because I feel like that's cherry picking. You're like, it's like when you get a pizza and you're like, "Oh, I don't like pineapples." I don't like that. I'm a fan of all of it. It's one big epic. It's an art.
You like its current direction, or how are you feeling?
I think it's interesting. I mean, I like the fact that the X-Men are finally, or just mutants in general, they're saying like, we're not going to allow you guys to just kill us anymore, and we're not going to apologize for you. And
like Your Nation, or like G Nation was.
Right. We're not going to apologize anymore. And like the way I always saw it, it was like Charles was sitting in a chair and getting punched in the face all the time. And with this current run, it's like he took the thing, like, okay, you're not going to punch me anymore.
No more face punching.
And no more for face. And the fact that he and Magneto are so on the same page with everything, but everybody else around him are nuts. Like they brought back Destiny. Destiny Mystique are a couple, and like I've been seeing all throughout the internet. Oh, Mystique's been suffering because Miss Destiny died, and they need to bring her back. Like, no, she's nuts. Mystique has been nuts, and her and Destiny now are kind of like the Harley Quinn and Joker of the X-Men. They just do stuff.
Yeah, what's interesting is the one character I find that was very, what's her name? Cassandra
Nova? Yeah. Cassandra Nova.
Cassandra Nova?
Yeah.
If I was ever going to do the X-Men again, I would have it start with her. Start over with her. And have her be the Xavier, and have her be this is the way we're going to do things, and da-da-da. I think that would be fascinating.
That would, also with Age of Apocalypse, I want to say you start with Age of Apocalypse that DC bit off 10 years later, and they called it Flashpoint. I'm sorry, no one ever, I don't think nobody gives you your credit. You've done so much in a shorter amount of time. You had hits. Like, you did more than Claremont did in his 17 years. You changed, and you didn't have to go back. And I appreciate that. I thank you for that.
Thank you.
I didn't meet Claremont until like I was a teenager. Like when he took over back in 2000, I had never read any of this. You were my writer. You were my man. And then like, I was like, okay, Claremont, he's cool.
Well, you know what's funny is Jeff and I were very close. Jeff Loeb and I were very close for years.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time they invited him to a conference, and we were on the food line together, and he goes, he said, yeah, this is kind of like my day job because I write movies. I was like, oh, you're a day job. So I really like took him under my wing, and we got really close. And then, you know, like, and then one day I was looking and I saw Emperor Joker, that storyline. And I was like, it's like, oh, my little bird has grown up and left the nest. Like, you know, like to me, that was the first real knockoff of Age of Apocalypse. But I will say it's, you know, it's interesting because Bleeding Cool just said that the baby, that North Star, died in his arms. Like, this baby's coming back. But it's so funny because I'll just tell you this story. I'll phrase it this way: is you know, I'll read on the internet how I'm not relevant anymore. You know, and I'm an old guy and I don't know how to write and blah blah blah. The way kids are writing nowadays, blah, blah. And it's like, you know, if an editor asks me to use captions, I'm like, okay, I'll use captions. If they say use thought balloons, like when I started Titans, I was using first person narration, and Bob came to me and said, Scott, we have 52 books. They're all doing the exact same thing with this first person narration. He goes, it's driving me crazy. So can you just like use regular, like, third person omnipresence? I'm like, okay, sure. So I did that. And then you read and people go like, oh, Lobdell's using thought balloons. He's so old. It's like, I'm not old. I mean, I guess I am old, but I mean, like,
you changed it.
When I did the X-Men Wildcats crossover in, I don't know, 93 or something, 94, I did it. There was no captions. I mean, I was working with Travis, so it's like getting storyboards for a movie. And I'm like, I'm not going to use any captions at all. I'm not going to use thought balloons. I'm just gonna, and now people do that all the time, and it's great. But it's not like I don't possess the ability to do that. I was just asked to write this particular way. So I'm always like, you know the internet. The internet's just a bunch of shouting people shouting. And all you have to do is write something, and oh, that's my opinion, and somebody likes it, and you're like, oh.
And people like to project. Like, I don't understand. I'm sorry. I don't understand how. I don't understand how you're overlooked. Like, it just seems like, all right, I love Claremont, but like, it just seems like they are just riding him so hard. They're like, oh, anybody afterwards? No, they didn't do it right.
Well, that's what's funny too, is like, you know, like every once in a while I'll get a call and be like, hey, Onslaught's back. I'm like, oh, good. Okay. You know, like this one's back, that one's back. Oh, we're doing the Prime, you know, filings again. And it's like, okay, that's great. You know, like those things didn't just materialize. But I'll just tell you this story is that I was, The Gifted came on TV.
Oh,
and it was, you know, it opens up with, and I'm like, I'm just going to see what the tone of the show is, whatever. So I turn it on, and, you know, this character, she's running away. Felt a lot like Zero Tolerance, right? She's running away from the cops. Cool. They have her trapped in this thing, and she blinks away. And so it's like, Blink is, you know, 25 years after I invented Blink, Blink is in The Gifted, and it's the opening scene, and it, you know, she blinks away and the cops go. And then it cuts to commercial. The commercial was the first time I saw Happy Death Day as a commercial on television. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm so irrelevant and outdated. 25 years from the time I invented Blink, she's in a show, and the first commercial is for my movie that won the box office the week it came out. It's like, so it's just, but again, like the internet, they just say what they want and everybody's.
Yeah, you just like,
so I just think it's funny. Like I don't, like if you ever look at like a Marvel encyclopedia or 50 years of Marvel, whatever. If you ever look, you can go into the index and it'll say Scott Lobdell, like page 96, and then you turn to page 96 and it's like he co-created Generation X.
Right.
And it's like, okay, guys, whatever, like whatever, enjoy yourself.
It's like,
yes, the 90s never happened. You just all came. It was Stan and Jack, and then you guys
not now.
everything with Ultimate Universe, and everything is good now. It's like, so
it's weird. I don't understand why they try to omit you. Like, you did some really groundbreaking stuff. Like, yeah, whatever. Oh,
well, I'll tell you what's kind of interesting is I was in Brazil 3 years ago, and people came up and they had comic books from when I was writing, but they were wrinkled comic books. They weren't 30 Mylar comics graded, whatever. These were people that had these books, read them until they were falling apart, found out I was going to be there and came, and there's so many people like that. And I thought, it's so interesting because I haven't written the X-Men in 25 years. Once in a while, you or someone will be like, hey, can you do a podcast or an interview or something? But it's interesting because someday I will die and there'll be an obituary. And like, there will be some people that I was their X-Men, the same way that some people love Chris Nolan's Batman. Like my Batman will always be Adam West.
Right.
There's just no, and I don't care how cool. I mean, this Robert Patterson thing, he looks pretty. I have to say, it looks pretty cool.
It's good,
but it's not my Batman. And similarly, like there will be people who I was their X-Men guy, and that run, those years were, and so it's interesting.
That Robert Patterson, like, I don't know what they're trying to do with Batman, but it seems like they're trying to make 7, doesn't it? Like this is just, with the new Batman movie that's coming. It looks like 7, right? Like, I'm not crazy.
7, yeah.
Yeah, it's like,
it looks to me like, I don't know if they did it on purpose or if they didn't, but it kind of looks like, okay, well, when you watch Joker, it's a thriller movie, with a supervillain sort of, a psychotic guy.
Yeah.
But having watched the trailers for this, I'm like, I could see, I mean, that the Joaquin Joker could show up in the last frame of this movie, and you go, yeah, okay. Seems like it's all in the same world to me, like.
I didn't even think about, I didn't even see Joker because I just thought that was just something they did. Like, if you took away all the Joker aspects of it, it would have been a great movie talking about mental illness. And they just like, okay, let's just throw in the Joker in it. Like, it's just, like, I don't like my intelligence being questioned. Like, are you insulting my intelligence? I see right through this. But Mr. Scott Lobdell, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a tremendous amount of fun.
No, just.
I hope my memory is, there are some people who've been like, Robin, but.
No, it's good because, like, it's your memory. You remember. It's how you do it. Like, what? You're one of the GOATs. I don't care what it. Like, you're right up there with Claremont. No one could touch.
Oh, thank you.
Like, because.
Thank you.
Man, I just. Hopefully, I'll have.
Well,
this
now you got to send me. Now you got to send me a email with you rating the top 10 in which order. I'd be curious.
Oh wow! Okay. Wow.
I only ask because you've read them all now, so
yeah.
I'm like,
I have. Oh man! Like, I will still say your work on Uncanny X-Men was great. X-Men in Space blew my mind. But the art though in 345, what happened? You just got you just got a new artist. It was like the ending of X-Men in Space, and the art just changed.
Well, you know what? I will tell you, this is kind of a funny story. This is your last behind the scenes story, but it was what happened was they were like, the X-Men never worked in space. Don't put them in space. I'm like, well, this will be different because it's about, them kind of like, I wanted the Beast to come back with a beard. I wanted the idea is that when they come back, they went off to war and they came back not scarred, but they came back different.
Yeah,
and
like Bishop has a dreadlocks, Beast has a beard, Gambit has long hair.
It should have been like really, yeah. Maybe Psylocke. I mean, maybe Rogue had a arm that was part phalanx or something. I mean, who knows? I don't know what, but it was going to be like, And so I was doing this story, and Bob and Mark was the editor at the time. Bob was editor-in-chief. And they're going, it doesn't work. Get him out of space. I go, well, I'm going to give him space for at least 6 issues. And every issue, no, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So finally I called up Joe Mad. I said, what page are you on? And he said, oh, I'm on the scene where Gambit is looking into the water or something. I said, all right, so that's page 8.
Yeah.
I said, do me a favor, just, make it a hologram, and I was out of space. It was like I was so tired of arguing with them.
Yeah.
That's why that story stopped.
Yeah.
Because I literally was like, okay, I'm not gonna fight with you guys anymore. You want to, fine, they're out of space, which is too bad because it would have been awesome. But
it was still awesome. Okay, well,
thanks. It had its moment, yeah.
Oh, you created, all right, this is my last. The last of your arc, of that space arc, they got back to Earth, and then Archangel and Psylocke met up with Maggot, and what is it, how you say it, Maggot or Maggot?
Maggot.
Maggot. I love, also
Maggot would be great now.
Maggot is a big, okay, good. So was your, I know.
Well, I will tell you one thing.
What's up?
Oh, sorry. No. What's your question first? I'm sorry.
With Gambit being revealed as the one who was behind the mutant massacre, was that like, how did the editors feel like when was that pitched to them, or did they give you that? Like,
well, my version was that he was a different person then, and what changed him was the mutant massacre.
Right.
And what people got out of it was, oh, he wasn't, he was evil, and so you made him evil. I go, I didn't make him evil. He was, he took a job,
right,
and he did the job, and then he realized that like he can't do everything for money, and that's when he met Storm, and then he, that was the beginning of his transformation. So was he ashamed of it? Yeah, but so. Like when they left him in the snow, I'm like, oh, give me a break. That was the most ridiculous. We don't like you. We're leaving you to die in the Antarctic. It's like, what? So that happened like the issue that I mean, my name was in the credits for that because they couldn't take it out, but I didn't write any of 350.
Oh, so Joe Kelly did that.
Yeah, or I get whose name was on it. And yeah, like again, like I like, I don't mind flawed characters. I don't mind the idea that like, that Gambit wasn't Sabretooth. He didn't go through and kill anybody. He literally, like was like, okay, my job is I'm a thief. I can get you in places. I got you in.
Right.
Have at it. Not realizing even that all these people are going to die. But I will tell you though that at one point I wanted. The character was called Crux, and he had these 2 Maggot characters, and I wrote him so he would be black, and then the issue came out, and he was blue, and his name was Maggot on the cover, and I'm like, why did you do that? And he's like, well, we just saw Nightcrawler's blue, Beast is blue, whatever blue. I mean, I wanted like a black character who had these things. And I go, who would ever call themselves Maggot? Like, how do you introduce yourself as Maggot? Hi, my name's Maggot. Nice to meet you. Maggot, look out! Look out behind you, Maggot! Like, I mean, Crux was a cool name. It has an X in it. It would have been awesome. But so then I was like, okay, well, while the maggots charge him with his energy, he's blue, but when he's not, he's his black self, you know.
Yeah.
But you know what's funny is, I'll just say this one thing, is that a few years ago somebody said, about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I was at a convention. Somebody said, "Hey, we're doing a panel and there's not enough people. Would you come and do this panel?" I said, "Sure." Said, "It's on diversity." And I said, "Okay." So I go, and they go, you know, they're talking. They said, "Well, what about you? You know, you've been around for, what do you think of this new diversity thing?"
Mm-hmm.
And I go, "You know what? I think it's great that they finally came up with a word for something that I've been doing for 30 years, you know." Like, if you look at Generation X, I mean, like,
Yeah.
I deliberately made Generation X not a white person heavy group,
Right.
you know. And so I've been, and like, so I was always like Cecilia Ray. I mean, I can't tell you how many characters that I always used to say, like, if we don't make another white male character, we're good, we're covered. I mean, you know,
right.
Marvel has, you know, 3,000 of them. What's that?
Marvel has a bunch of white guys. We call them,
yeah, and DC. DC. I remember when I went to DC one time, they were relaunching not Guardians. They're relaunching Legion of Superheroes, and they had like 36 characters. I go, "What are you doing?" Like, "What?" I go, "You have like one black character in this group," and they're like, "Well," I said, "it says, like, you know, the greatest heroes of the universe. You're telling me that you can't find that there's one black guy in this group?" And they're like, "Well, you know, that one's pink and that one's green." I go, "You know, you guys."
That doesn't count.
And I went to, you know, yeah. And when Marvel, when we came back, you can see it when we came back from Heroes Reborn, and they were relaunching Earth's Mightiest Heroes, and I had this huge fight with them about going, like, it's Earth's Mightiest Heroes, and you have, you know, there was no black character in it, and at least in the initial group. I go, "They're called Earth's Mightiest. It's 350 million people in America alone, and you can't find, you know, a black person to put in this group." And then they finally came up with triathlon,
really?
Which, I'm sorry, I don't. Was he ever used? I think they promised he was going to be an issue 6 or something. He was this black sports guy or something, you know. But I'm thinking, you know, but I mean, I don't know. So it's just crazy. It's like, you know, I just bring that up because I didn't want another blue character with Maggot. I wanted Maggot to always be this like cool black guy.
And he was cool. And the fact that he was trying to hit on Psylocke the entire time, it was just funny.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Oh, no. Well, he wasn't hit on the entire time, but like he hit on her in front of Archangel, and Archangel got really mad.
Yeah. Well, I like the fact that he was from another culture, and he's just like, "Hey, what's the big deal?" You know, like.
Oh man, but thank you. I kept you like, wow, it's dark now.
Yeah, we were joking at the beginning about counting down together, but I think we might wind up.
Yeah.
How many? We only have a few more hours to go.
Yeah, like 6 hours and 45 minutes. What, 44 minutes? Oh, well, thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
You've been amazing.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's fun to every once in a while remember all these things.
It's like I love reading the old books. Like,
well, you know what? I may never show up in more than one page of the Marvel Encyclopedia, but
you're in
like people in Brazil and people like you and other fans, it's like I know that people, you know.
Yeah, you're not forgotten. You're not forgotten at all. Like, come on, Age of Apocalypse. I would say Age of Apocalypse is a better story than Dark Phoenix.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's bold.
Yeah, and I'll go tooth for nail. And like, I love Claremont, but I have critiques about what he like with Shadowcat, how she was a 13-year-old girl basically sexually harassing a 19-year-old immigrant. Yeah, no, that was weird.
And Wolverine takes him out to the diner. And he's like, "You better not hurt her." It's like, you better not hurt her. How about you say, "Hey, look, girl, You're 13 years old. That was weird.
Yeah, it was really weird.
So.
Oh man, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. This 1407 Gray Mountain Lane, signing out.